This module will go over 3 different methods of conducting a hypothesis test and demonstrate their equivalence. We'll start off with an example that we'll use throughout. Imagine that you're interpreting the results of a randomized control trial, an RCT, that was designed to assess the impact of a training program on mean income. Your treatment group has a sample size of 200, and the mean income of that group after the program was $33,000. Your control group also has a sample size of 200, and the mean income of that group is $32,500. The standard deviation in both groups is 2,300. Now what we want to know is that $500 statistically significant? Or could it just be due to random sampling fluctuation and the $500 difference isn't actually statistically significant? Let's recall the general idea behind hypothesis testing. First, we establish a null hypothesis, in this case that our treatment has no impact, mu sub t minus mu sub c equals 0. And if we reject this null hypothesis, we're forced to accept the alternative that the treatment does in fact have some impact. Next, we construct the sampling distribution of our estimator and determine how unlikely it was to have drawn an estimate as extreme or more extreme as the one that we drew, assuming the null hypothesis is true. So because we assume the null hypothesis is true and that there was no impact, we center the sampling distribution at 0. We actually observed a difference in mean incomes of $500. And that appears somewhere over here on the sampling distribution. So it's fairly unlikely to have observed that big of a difference given that our null hypothesis was true. And because observing such a difference would be so unlikely if the null hypothesis were true, we reject the null hypothesis and conclude that the program did have some impact. Now, if we had observed a smaller difference, say $100, which falls here on the sampling distribution, we'd have to say that this is not so unlikely even given our null hypothesis of no impact, even if that were true. And so in that case, we'd fail to reject that null hypothesis, and we would be unable to conclude that this difference was statistically significant.